want to know what I did today? And I said, no, what did you do today? And she said, I drove my parents around every cemetery in Pennsylvania. And I said, why did you do that? And she said, because we can't agree on which cemetery they want to be buried in. And my dad wants to be in the ground and my mom wants a mausoleum. And so we're having this conversation. I'm doing a tour of cemeteries of Pennsylvania with them. Welcome to Spark Me, a podcast for women who know life is just getting interesting.
Each week, we spark great conversations, share lived experiences, real resources, and tap into the collective wisdom that comes from learning together.
If you're looking for connection, not perfection, fresh ideas, and a community where you truly belong,
then pull up a chair. You're in the right place. Welcome to Spark Me.
Well, hello, Michelle. It's great to see you.
Hey, Liz. It's so great to be back. It's always great to be back. And another Spark Short. And I want to start this Spark Short with an update from you and your dad. I want to know how your dad's doing.
You know what? He's doing a lot better. I don't know if I can't recall if I talked about this on Spark Me or not, but he's had about a month of some very serious health issues that have landed him in both the hospital and a rehab hospital, and he is recovering from those. The progress is slow, but he's doing it. But it was really sort of timely with our conversation with Cameron the other day, talking about having to have that conversation with your parents as they get older and making sure that you know, that the kids are prepared to take over health decisions and financial decisions and things like that when their parents have some sort of crisis. And while we have that all set up in our family, it's still stressful. I mean, I was at the rehab facility with my dad today, and we were sitting there paying bills together and making sure that everything that he needed taken care of at home was being taken care of. And so it's something that a lot of um, a lot of women our age are facing and dealing with. And so I just thought Cameron's episode was really so important and so relevant.
Oh my God, I couldn't agree more. It was a lot of things hit home in the conversation. And I was going to ask because I know that, you're in the financial world and the company that your dad started, that you and your brother and your family now run. And so I imagine that you had that stuff kind of, at least the financial side together. Has anything been a
Mhm.
surprise to you? Or is there anything that like you wish you had more together?
Yeah. So, one thing that was sort of a surprise is a couple of years ago when my mom was going through her health issues, we pulled out like advanced directives and powers of attorney and all of that kind of thing. And we had those for my dad. And I remember having the conversation like, hey, we want to get these on your health portal. So if anything were to happen, the hospital has it. And everyone thought that we had done that. And we hadn't. so so at some point somebody had to go to the office and pull it out of a file, cabinet and scan it in and put it on the portal. But so that was, so even as like buttoned up as we are in doing all of these things, somebody just forgot to post it to the portal. And that would be something that, caught us.
Yeah, these are definitely, I mean, Cameron, so our guest was Cameron Huddleston, and she wrote the book, Mom and Dad, We Need to Talk. And what really struck me about the book, first of all, I'm having these conversations left, right, all over the place with my friends, right? It is just sadly that time. It's like, it's almost like that time when every other weekend there was a wedding at one point in life, right? Now,
Yeah.
this, this time of life, it's like, sadly, we're like in that stage of losing parents and
Mhm.
being in tough situations with them. So I've heard all kinds of stories, and so much of what Cameron said was hitting home for me. We went through it, my family with both parents, and some things were together and some things weren't. And so there were the one thing that I think was a couple things she said that resonated for me, right? Which was based on experience and based on things I've heard my friends saying is like the sibling dynamic, right? Is a
Yeah.
big one. And how some siblings like it falls on their shoulders. And I love that she said, look, if you're the one taking care of it and your other siblings start to have an opinion, it's okay to say thank you for your opinion.
Yeah.
And do what you think is right because you're the one handling the situation. And I know in my situation, you know, there were a couple of my siblings were handling things more than I was, and fully
Mhm.
trusted too. There was nothing,
Sure.
but because of that, I also respected the decisions they were making, right? That
Mhm.
like, okay, and thankfully, like I said, there was a lot of trust and a lot of feeling like things were in good hands, but also just I don't think I would have stepped into that and tried to force myself in there. But I know a lot of families, it's not that way, and it seems, as Cameron said, it seems to always fall on the daughter. Like, are you seeing that? If there is a daughter and sons, um, it seems like the daughter, even if she's not the one that was closest with the mom, is the one or the dad. Seems to be the one who becomes the
Yeah.
caretaker. Liz, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, for sure in my family, I am the caretaker, and that sort of surprised me because I'm the youngest, and I always think of the caretaker as being sort of like the oldest in the family. In our family, my sister is the oldest, and she lives out of the area. But what I will say is that to your earlier piece on, how do you manage the sibling dynamics, we did go through that with when my mom was sick a couple of years ago, and I'll never forget because my brother and myself and my dad, we were tag teaming it so that somebody was always there when doctors were making their rounds and would get the information, and we had this group text chat with the family. And I remember like talking to my sister, and she said, "Well, why don't you do this?" And I said, "Look, if you wanna be part of the decision making, then you have to come up here, and then you can be part of it. But if you're not gonna be here geographically, you just have to
Yeah,
trust that we're doing the best we can." And, once I said it that way, I mean, it wasn't confrontational or anything like
yeah,
that. It was just like, "Look, this is what we're doing." She totally got it, and she
yeah,
totally said, "I'm sorry, you're right,"
yeah,
and so I do think that that's a very emotional period, and it's really hard when you don't have any control in the situation, and so you're, like, looking for ways to, like, regain that control just so that, you feel like you're, impacting it. And so I get how difficult it is for the sibling who's not here, who is just, hearing the decisions, but is not part of the decision making. That's a tough spot to be in too. Um, but at the end of the day, everybody wants what's best for their loved one. And you just have to trust the people that are there day to day, talking
yeah.
to the doctors. So,
Yeah, I did get a little worried though because I have 2 boys, and as I mentioned on the podcast, I'm
you
like,
should start talking to your sister right now.
yeah, yeah.
One of your sisters is going to have to step in.
Like, "Whew, I better start saving some money for caregivers," and,
I know.
and that
I
but to
know.
be in all honesty, that was another thing that really kinda stood out when she talked about the cost of long-term care.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to see that at earlier stages of life and we are living longer and longer. And just and that's why I kind of asked Liz, and I know you help manage people's finances and grow their money. And just wondering, are people like aware of that? Is that something that is it more is it something people are more aware of now, but maybe weren't in the past? But because it these are long spans of time that people need to be funded so that they're not
Hmm.
putting the burden on their kids. I mean, I know some people who are retiring around 55 or 60, and I'm thinking, well, I personally would like to live till, triple digits. Like that's a long way
Yeah,
to go, right?
exactly.
Yeah, and I do wonder how people on the world are. I know that it's something that I like kind of go, how am I going to do this? I don't want to put any burden on my kids. I also I can't truly fully lean on and expect them to be there, nor would I want to put that burden on them. So it's something I am proactively thinking of, you know, in the future. Is
So,
that something you've seen?
yeah, so we look at that a lot. And I will say that there are sort of two camps depending on where you are financially. Um, if you know, if you have a bit of wealth, it's completely reasonable to self-fund your care. And and you can do that. Long-term care insurance is probably a better bet if you don't have a lot of wealth. But the problem, it's a very good assistance. So I'm not going to say it's not. The problem with it is that, and problem is probably a strong word. That the sometimes the challenge is that the criteria for meeting the long term care insurance, uh, um, so that it activates, is getting harder and harder to meet those requirements. And they have, because of early insurance policies not being properly funded, they now cap how much they'll pay for as far as
Mm.
care. And then people don't realize that it takes 90 days before the insurance will kick in. So you need to have funding in place to cover 90 days. Um, so that's the other thing that happens, because sometimes these situations with family members when they get sick, it's such like a quick thing, right? Like they were totally fine and then they had a stroke or something. And so from the moment that you initiate the policy, you've got that 90-day window. So if you're so focused on caring for your family member, as you should, you might not initiate that policy right away. So there's just that little bit of a gap there, and people are always surprised by that. And but what I will say, and something that has been incredibly helpful for me, with both of my parents navigating the healthcare system, is having a very strong network of people that are working in that system that you can tap into. So I have a dear friend who's an occupational therapist, and another friend that runs a home health and hospice company. I have friends on, boards of healthcare systems, and I have friends that are doctors, and I have friends that run rehab facilities. And I have had to reach out to each of those people at some point to get information on, helping out my loved one. And I would not have been able to do that if I hadn't built those network of relationships. And that's something that nobody ever talks about, but you really need to build a network. And that's really hard to do if you're out of town and your loved one, is in a different city.
Yeah, and when she talked about the healthcare advocate, we have a doctor in our family, and she was
Hmm.
like a translator, right? I mean, we leaned so hard on her to understand the diagnoses and what was happening because it is truly like another language. And it
It
is so
is.
hard sometimes to understand. And especially when you're in a state of emotion or you're not like yeah,
Yeah.
processing because so much is going on. And it was just really or you get results and it's like, well, what does that mean in English? Like
Right.
it was
Yeah.
great to have a doctor in the family who could who could be on these calls and translate for the family what was happening and what was going on. And I took that, I didn't take it for granted, but like I felt very fortunate that we had that. And I wondered what happens in families where they don't have that person, right? And you're trying to understand all this new language and new stuff and things you've never heard of or diagnoses you didn't know existed,
Yeah.
it's gotta be really hard. And are there health advocates you can hire, Liz? I don't.
You know, I am the answer to that is I am not sure. There are advocates like within healthcare systems, but
Yeah,
I strongly believe that there is a business model out there for a standalone healthcare advocate. And the minute you have a loved one with a serious illness, the hospital says, call this person, and you hire them to be the one to help you navigate the system because it is a system. And if you go in there blind, your loved one is not going to get like they're not going to maximize the opportunities for the care, is what I would say. It's not that the nurses and the doctors are going to do a phenomenal job no matter. I'm just saying that that there are things that happen that if you're not in that world, you're just not gonna know how to navigate, effectively.
abs absolutely, and especially, I know no matter even with a doctor, my sister being a doctor, it was still really difficult. I know there are a lot of issues with healthcare and getting the things that we thought were, you know, were being provided from, from healthcare.
Mhm.
So there's that end of it. And just by the way, I think you just put a great business idea out there. So if anybody wants to run with it, right? The little
Exactly.
coding, hit a little AI, they can get that going anytime soon. Yeah, that idea. And I do remember now Stacy Fritz when she was on, she mentioned there was a website that it's for anybody who's been diagnosed with cancer, and they do have
Mhm.
advocates there to help walk you through it. We'll put it in the show notes because I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But and I thought, what a beautiful thing to offer to have
Right.
somebody standing next to you who can help you make sense of all of these things when you're in just in crisis. So
The
that was another thing.
I was talking to a friend of mine about, the healthcare system, which, nobody pays attention to it until they need it, right? At
Mhm,
least I don't, or you're working in it. But I view the healthcare system, having just gone through this latest thing with my dad, as almost like, when you're building a house, obviously you're an architect, Michelle, so you know this well. Like everybody has their lane, right? So the electrician comes in and they run the wires, but they don't do anything with the plumber. The plumber comes in and he
mhm,
puts in the pipes. And he could care less about the drywall guy. The drywall guy comes in and he puts up the drywall, and then you've got, the painter, and they all do good work, and but they only do their work. They only do their lane, right? And it's
mhm,
up to the general contractor to sort of put it all together in a great way that makes a beautiful home, right?
mhm, mhm.
As
Yep.
far as the construction goes. And I view that that is the way the healthcare system is, right? The doctor comes in and he does his piece, and then, he or she moves on, and then the nurse comes in and they do their piece. And then you have rehab, they do their piece, and then you have, outpatient physical therapy, but nobody is overseeing the whole arc of it, right? And the primary care physician, that was always supposed to be their role. But in a lot of cases, they're cut out if you're in a hospital with a closed network system. And on top of it, we put such incredible, like efficiency burdens on these primary care physicians that they don't have time to like fully, manage from, sort of the hospital to the great outcome result at the end process, right?
Yeah.
I think our healthcare system, I mean, that's just one aspect of why it's broken, but that is a pretty big aspect right there. And I think that
Mhm.
that deserves a real thoughtful conversation, um, among our community leaders and among, federal and state folks. I mean, because we've got to, around the country, this is what people are facing, and it's a real
Mhm.
problem. And I think we've really got to put some thoughtful leaders in a room and start to figure this out.
Absolutely. That was a great analogy, Liz. That was yeah, if you don't have that oversight, that somebody who can see all the pieces and the parts and the what's how they're all supposed to interconnect, you can
Hmm.
very easy for mistakes to get made or to lose, to not get something that you really need or to miss a step. So that's I love
Right.
that. You're right. And then the other, some of the other things is sort of I mean, just such a great conversation, top to bottom. But I also was thinking that a big takeaway from that episode was not just saying, "Here's how you talk to your parents, and here's how you have difficult conversations." And she had so many golden nuggets for how to do that, in a way that would keep them feeling control and agency over their lives. But the other kind of flip side of that was saying, like, "This will be you someday, so right
Right.
now is when you need to start," right? So, her mom was 65
I know,
when
so young, right?
so young when she got Alzheimer's. She lost her dad when her dad was 61. Like,
Hmm.
it is not too soon to start looking at your own affairs and getting them in order. And it just reminded me, like, I think it's been almost a decade since I even looked at mine. Like when my boys came, of course, I was like, okay, got to get all this together. But
Right.
she said, like, you should be looking at it every 10 years or so just to make sure,
Hmm.
is everything the same? Has anything changed? Has technology changed? Have my desires changed? Have my finances
Hmm.
changed? Right? Like,
Right.
um,
Exactly.
yeah. And that really resonated with me. Like, I don't again, because I don't wanna be a burden, um, we're all thinking of our parents now, but, like,
Hmm.
we're gonna be that, and I know I'm not gonna wanna give up my keys, right?
They're going to have self-driving cars. I mean, you're not going to have to worry about
Thank you. Thanks, Liz, I feel better now. Okay. Yeah, that was a big
Yeah. I will tell you, I have seen one of the things that I have seen in my work, my profession, which Cameron talked a little bit, sort of alluded to it, but um, you know, a lot of times parents don't want to talk about this because maybe not all the kids get along, or maybe they have chosen one child to manage things and they don't want to upset the other kids, and so they just avoid having the conversation, right? But it does such a disservice to the kids, because I see so many families that were solid that break apart in the estate process because the parents never had that conversation. And so whenever I'm talking with families, I always say it's like the kindest gift that you can give to your kids is to have these conversations as a group, as a family group, when you're alive, what you want, if there's a painting that you want to go to one of your kids, give it, tell them that as a group when you're all together, so
Mm.
that there's no miscommunication. There's no, you know, that's mom's favorite paperweight and I want that paperweight, like, I mean,
She
stuff that
told me I
caused
could have it. She
nothing,
told
right?
me.
Exactly. I mean, and you think it's silly, but it totally happens in the, because it's an emotional time, and a lot of, like, um issues that maybe happened, 30 years ago crop up during this type of stuff. And so honestly, for parents who have, you know, kids, they should be sitting down and just talking to them about, you know, this is this is how we want this to go, and so that they're not having to make these decisions blind, at a very emotional and vulnerable time.
That's such great advice. I actually saw a reel about that. I watch a lot of reels. I actually saw a reel about that where there was is a very wealthy individual, but he said they have family meetings once a year, and then go
Hmm.
over the finances of the family. Like, nothing is hidden. It is all transparent. And he
Yep.
says, right now, here's who's getting what if anything should happen. And he said,
Yep.
and a lesson in life is it's not always equal, right?
Right.
And he
Right.
explains why, right? He gets to explain
Mhm.
why, and here's the reasoning, and he feels like it keeps the family together, and
Yeah.
and things aren't hidden, things aren't cloaked behind closed doors, and you don't know what's gonna. And then he also said that he gives out money during life, right? So that
Oh, for
people
sure.
aren't sort of
Mhm.
waiting for the clock to tick down, right? And they're
Yeah.
using the money when it's most helpful to them. Right?
Mhm.
So, a lot of people are like, "Well, when I die, then all this money will go and help my kids." Like, but when you live for a long time, your kids could be in their 70s when you go. And when they needed
Yeah.
that money was back when they were raising a family, in their 30s or
Mhm.
40s. So I thought that was a very interesting perspective, and it sounded very reasonable, quite frankly. But
Yeah.
I know every family is different, and that wouldn't work for some families. But I thought that was cool.
Yeah, as much as you can do that type of thing. Like, here's a funny story. I was talking to a friend of mine. This was a couple of years ago, and she said, "Well, you want to know what I did today?" And I said, "No, what did you do today?" And she said, "I drove my parents around every cemetery in Pennsylvania." And I said, "Why did you do that?" And she said, "Because we can't agree on which cemetery they want to be buried in, and my dad wants to be in the ground and my mom wants a mausoleum, and so we're having this conversation. I'm doing a tour of cemeteries of Pennsylvania with them until we choose the one and the location and all of that." And I was laughing, but I thought, well, very smart on her part, because both of her
Yeah.
parents are in good health, and you
Yep.
know neither of them, are imminently going to pass away. And so
Yep.
it's a conversation that you can have now, because it's a hypothetical, right? Like,
Yeah.
but she'll have that, nailed down and wrapped up.
Yeah, because the last thing you wanna do, I loved also when Cameron was like, "There's a cost to not having these conversations," right?
Hmm.
Having them after the shoe has dropped. They're very different conversations, and, it doesn't take long for mental capacity to go away in one way
Yeah,
or shape or form. Sometimes it's like if one partner dies, and it's usually if the woman goes before the man tends
I
to struggle.
know.
This is what I've
Yeah,
seen, right?
yeah.
He just, like, is a little lost without his lady. Um, yeah, so I just there were so many good, and even when it made me really think about, like, my dad had 2 brothers who weren't married, right? So,
Hmm.
but they were very close to the family, and just that idea of taking care of others in the family and who's responsible for them, and how do you reach out and make sure they're okay too, because
Hmm.
well, they may not have been thinking to take care or put their affairs in order, but it is still going to fall on somebody, right?
Right. Exactly.
So good to watch that stuff. uh and it reminded me of my uncle. Like, I told the story about the scam, and I think those scams are real. There's
Oh, they're so yeah, they're so sophisticated now. I mean, and they totally target, older people, because they know that, they're gonna be more vulnerable, more easy to confuse, and more vulnerable to pressure, putting, pressure on them. It's awful, really
Oh,
awful.
I can totally see myself falling for one of those, like, when the time
Mhm,
comes, just being like, "Oh, yeah,
mhm.
oh, okay," like,
I
a little
know.
gullible.
I
How does
know.
that be like,
I know, I
"Why
know.
why is Michelle homeless?" Well, she fell for the scam, right?
Well,
Yeah,
I
there's
thought, I mean, I have to say, as somebody that deals with this subject a bit in my profession, I really thought Cameron's book was excellent.
yeah.
And I'm going to buy several copies and share it with different folks that I think would benefit from it. But um, it, it wasn't too long. It had great advice, great tools. I really thought it was a great way to start to think about these conversations.
That's just it. It does make you think about them. And, I showed the episode I always do with, like, my girlfriends on a couple text threads I'm on, and it did ignite some good conversations, because everybody's
Mhm.
going through this. And that book is just, a really easy gift to give to people. If, you know, a great resource. Again, we're about resources. I think that book is an incredible resource for anybody who
Mhm.
is in whatever stage of this, right? Even our
Mhm.
stage was, where we need to be thinking about it and setting up our posterity for, what happens next. I think it also is helpful because for anybody who still is lucky enough to have a parent like you do or parents like others do, um,
Mhm.
help navigate these waters.
I do, and we mentioned it on the podcast, but at the end of her book, she has a page in there where she talks about, the other thing that's really important is, talking to your parents and like using your iPhone or whatever, make videos of them telling stories and
Mhm.
getting those family stories and history and how they, you know, make a particular recipe that, is a family favorite, whatever it might be, that is equally important as getting all of your estate planning and all of the other, your financial documents and all of those things in place. That's critically important. But but at the end of the day, when your loved one is gone, you know that it's those family stories that you think, oh, I wish, mom was here and I could ask her.
That's really how they live on,
Mhm.
not just for
Mhm.
us, but for those like I wish 3 generations, 4 generations, 10 generations from now, like those in our family who are here because of my mom and dad should know them. And those
Yes,
stories would be the way they could know them, like, you have no idea how awesome these people were, like, and by then, they would have been forgotten, right? So, but
exactly.
something like that, a great, 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 great grandchild could pick up and learn about, these incredible people who, were able to carry the world on their shoulders somehow and, raise kids and, get through tough times and create grow incredible businesses and, all of it. I want that would allow like, I wish I had those stories. We did a different version because I didn't think of that, like, at one point, all of my siblings and I, we did a podcast, like, we did a little
Yeah.
podcast where we told the stories about growing up and what we remembered about our parents, but it would have been great to hear the first person from them, right?
Mm,
So we have our memories of them,
yeah.
but to have them saying, firsthand about their lives would have been really special. And yeah, so that's another great point. And lots of
Well,
do that now.
yeah, and I mean, this is a theme that we're gonna explore actually in our next episode.
Yes.
So it'll be a great dovetail to this episode that we had with Cameron. So
Yeah. So stay tuned, everybody. Same bat
absolutely.
chime, same bat channel. Right? And
Exactly,
if you got that
exactly.
reference, you
You're old.
know.
That's what that means. You're old. But yeah, this is a great episode, and I hope everybody takes a listen to it because it's probably, one of the kindest, smartest things you could do for your family, are the items that Cameron details.
Yeah. So big thanks to Cameron for sharing all that with us and writing that book. And Liz, I'm really glad your dad's doing better. And it was good to see you again. And this was another fun Spark Short.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Have a great week, Michelle.
You too, Liz.
The information presented in this podcast is for general informational and educational purposes only. It does not constitute investment advice, financial advice, trading advice, or any other type of professional advice. You should not make any investment decisions without first consulting with your own financial advisor and conducting your own research and due diligence.